Hello and welcome to the show. Well, Sydney stepped up to the plate on the weekend. Melbourne went to the footy, but our auction clearance rates around Australia held up, as you'll hear from Kevin Brogan at CoreLogic in just a moment. Back then.
In today's market, great ideas alone simply aren't enough, but innovative execution can hand you a real competitive advantage. Nightlight is a cutting-edge illuminated signboard by Printforce that offers round-the-clock visibility and features that maximise advertising space, improving your exposure. Buyers can now see the full picture, day or night, with Nightlight's edge-to-edge illuminated surface, which utilises environmentally friendly, scratch-resistant technology. Now available in 6x4 and 8x4. Nightlight is as versatile as you need to be in today's market. Let your clients know you're working day and night for them, and then prove it with Nightlight.
Yes, well, as we welcome Kevin Brogan into the show, Sydney certainly stepped up. We'll bring up the preliminary clearance rates. Kevin, good morning. Good afternoon. I always do that. Anyway, I get lost.
How are you, Kevin?
I'm very well, thank you. Okay, let's have a look at these preliminary results. Sydney really stepped up to the plate. Clearance rate not too bad, but almost 1,000 auctions.
Yeah, look, we've seen the first real step up in auction activity. Over the last few weeks, we've seen a gradual increase. But this week in Sydney, we're up from 646 last week to 939. Clearance rate has been really quite resilient. This is what you might term a test of the market with that additional supply coming on. But the preliminary clearance rate indeed a fraction higher than it was last week.
It was interesting, I caught up with some friends over the weekend and we were talking about the AFL Grand Final. And she made the comment that, gee, you'd have to be a brave person to go to auction in Melbourne on AFL Grand Final. But have a look at that clearance rate, 82%. I know the numbers were down, but, if someone wants to buy a property, they'll go to the auction.
Oh, look, I think that's right. But it is interesting. If your team was in the grand final, you're probably going to prioritise.
Yeah.
But you're right. The 103 auctions for the week in Melbourne now. Following your logic, not widely held by market participants, insofar as I understand, only one auction actually, if you'll pardon the sporting analogy, kicked off while the AFL final was actually on. But yeah, there were 43 auctions on the day, and obviously the clearance rate that you see there at 82.5% sort of. It does support the premise of those vendors who went ahead, because that is quite a successful outcome.
Yeah, when you think of it, if you wanted to, you could always have a live stream. You could be showing the AFL Grand Final leading up to the auction. Imagine, the bidding would be over pretty quickly because we've got to get back to the football.
You would, but I would imagine the crowds wouldn't want to be travelling while it was on, so they'd probably stick around in your front room until it was finished.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. I hadn't thought of that. Okay, well, let's move. We're going to give you two top sales out of Sydney, and there's a reason for that. I'll tell you about it in a moment. And two sales out of Brisbane. But we'll get to the Brisbane ones pretty soon. Before we do, let's go to the Sydney sub-regions. Take us through this one, mate. Once again, City and Inner South. Really good result.
Absolutely, and the
Northern
eastern
Beaches.
suburbs,
Yeah.
and North Sydney and Hornsby, Northern Beaches, all the regulars are in the top range. But I think it's been a couple of weeks now since we've mentioned Baulkham Hills and Hawkesbury and Sutherland. But again, those sub-regions not typically in the sort of highest returning sub-regions, but they certainly have been. On a number of occasions for the last few weeks. So it's good to see that. That sort of shows the depth of the strength in the market for purchasers.
What do you put that down to?
Oh, look, I think, in each of those areas, Baulkham Hills and Hawkesbury, look, the house prices there, the median price sold under auction conditions there, probably not as high as in some of the other locations. Bit further out, maybe there's a bit more of affordable property on the market there, and affordability constraints still quite significant in Sydney.
Absolutely. Well, we'll take you to the two sales that we're going to feature out of Sydney. The first one was actually recorded during the week, and we're going to feature this one because we like to look at the sales that occurred over the full week. This one, Sotheby's selling it, and it was at 2 Colgoa Road at Bellevue Hill. Michael and Joseph selling this 5-bedder. A grand family home with city skyline and district views, great views here. It's been offered for the first time, I believe, Kevin, in 60 years. One of Bellevue Hill's most prestigious and tightly held areas. It says street, but it really is a road. 2 Colgoa Road, Bellevue Hill. Marvellous property.
Oh, look, it certainly is. I mean, it really has a great deal of street appeal and presence. It's a very substantial home. As you say, those views are really what sells it. It's interesting, this property. I mean, it's about 6 kilometres from the Sydney CBD, so I'll give you an idea of the sort of view that it gets from an elevated position looking towards the city. The median price here is about 5.7 million. Now, that's actually up by a modest amount in 2019, about 0.4%. But it's actually exhibited a 50% increase in the median house price in Bellevue Hill since 2015. So even with that softening in 2018, it's really quite a long way ahead over a relatively short time frame.
Yeah. Well, the second New South Wales property we want to feature is one in Werribee, 45 Cherry Street. This one is the highest sold property under the hammer on Saturday. Di Jones selling this property for $5,350,000, a 5-bedroom home. Very wide street frontage, this one. Expansive open plan living. A synthetic grass north-south facing tennis court. That's the only one to have. Home office and a billiard room, ducted heating. A very tightly held enclave, this one. What can you tell us about this area, Kevin?
Yeah, so look, on the theme of being tightly held, I mean, it's interesting. We do keep statistics about the average duration of ownership, and at 13 years for Werribee, that's actually at the higher end of the range for the average time held.
Yep.
This area's got a median house price just a shade under $3 million. It's actually down about 10% from 2018, but the last few sales that we've seen here in the last 3 or 4 months are showing that it's actually picking up. And obviously, a property like this, which is such a significant property for the area, has actually done very well at auction.
Excellent. All right, off to Melbourne now. Not a lot to report out of Melbourne, as we told you. Most people going to the grand final. But I guess we'd look at one of the areas like West or Southeast where they had a reasonable number of auctions and a very good success rate.
Yeah, look, the Southeast almost up to 90% there, but only 19 results collected. Yep. And the Outer East has been the star performer for a number of weeks now at 83.3%, but only 12 auctions. Interestingly, there are 5 sub-regions that really didn't have enough auctions to be able to return a preliminary result. So a really quiet week in Melbourne. Yeah. But those auctions that went did well. Yeah,
well, it wasn't a quiet day for Barry Plant, for Mark and Rahad. They actually sold the property at 20 Bruce Street, Bulleen, $285,000. Delighted people bidding for this property. Quite an upmarket contemporary style home, 5 bedrooms, a good family residence, very close to a lot of parks. There's a tennis centre there nearby too, I believe, Kevin. Transport, shopping, elite private schools spread across 2 levels, fully landscaped, 728 square metres. I'm not familiar with Bulleen. Can you tell me a little bit about it, please?
Yeah, look, it's 15 kilometres northeast of Melbourne, and it certainly is an area that has seen sort of development of some really quite significant family homes. This property was purchased with an existing home on it, which was demolished, and the dwelling that you see now was built in 2013. Very imposing street frontage, and you see quite a lot of this style of property in the area. The median price here, about $1.1 million, and that is actually down 16% from peak. Now, we mentioned about tightly held with the last sale. I mean, actually in Berlin, the average ownership is 16 years. So once again, this is an area which is relatively tightly held.
Yeah. I know, very well-established areas. We see that quite often, don't we? In those well-established family areas, they hold on to them. Let the family grow up, and it's time for someone else to move in. We're going to take a short break. After that, I'll come back with a couple of Brisbane properties. I'm going to take you to the ACT and also to Adelaide. And I want to, at the end of the show too, just bring the worm in, because I've got a couple of points that I'd like to talk to Kevin Brogan about. We'll be back in just a moment. We'll take you inside a couple of classic Queensland sales in just one moment.
Hi everyone, my name's Nick and I'm the Country Manager here at Beepo. We offer outsourcing services for real estate agencies that are looking to become significantly more productive and efficient. Let me give you a bit of a rundown about how our real estate team actually works. At Beepo, we have many positions to assist our clients in the real estate industry. These include sales assistants, trust account and marketing staff. We also have a couple of our most popular products, the property management assistants and Rock End property assistants.
Welcome back to the show. Let's have a look at the Queensland sales that grabbed our attention. The most, or the highest price sale in Queensland over the weekend was in New Farm, 77 Langshaw Street, a nice little enclave. This one, $2,195,000. McGrath's, Brett Grinsell and Jermaine Jones. Jermaine Jones selling this one, 4-bedroom. Wonderful facade, this. Very typical of the Queenslander style. Lots of iron lacework, a marble heath fireplace inside, entertainer's deck, modern and traditional bathrooms. One of them even has the old clawfoot. We don't see too many clawfoots around, Kevin.
No, we don't, and when we do, the agents are very keen on mentioning them as a selling feature.
Yes, so. Indeed, and I believe too this property, same owner for 29 years. So there you go. That's fairly clear. Interesting. The other property we're going to feature in just a moment too is one that was where the current owner, I think, held it for something like 35 years. We'll get to that in just a moment. New Farm, very exclusive area. This one, Kevin.
Oh, look, it is. There's been a lot of unit development over the years in this locality, but I mean, this is a generous-sized block, as you say. It's been in the same ownership for almost 3 decades. It sits in very well-established gardens. It has been meticulously looked after, and as you say, the renovation that's been undertaken has been fairly significant. It's interesting here. The median price for houses, $1.6 million. So this is something special even for the area, and that's actually an increase in about 10% since the dip that was experienced in around 2017. It's only a kilometre as the crow flies from the city centre, and as a visitor to Brisbane, I know the area quite well from the river walk that runs along and under the Story Bridge. So it's if the mood takes you, it's actually quite a pleasant walk into the city. Knowing
you, my friend, it would be a run, wouldn't it?
It is, yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
Not very
a walk.
Quick.
No, my friend Kevin Brogan doesn't walk very often. Mainly runs at a great pace. Hey, I want to take you to another sale. The reason I want to feature this one is because I did actually go to it. Friends of ours were selling their property, 32 Marigold Street at Margate. We featured this one on one of my shows recently, but sold under the hammer for $637,000. Ray White's Jonathan Gordon. The reason I want to mention this one, Kevin, and I'd love to get your take on this too, auctioneer was Andrew Sim, and Andrew and Jonathan worked so well together. In fact, I was interested to see that the buyer for this property was actually the very first person to inspect it, even before it hit the market. So it just shows you how a good agent can hold on to a buyer for quite a long period of time. He held the buyers there for quite some time, then worked with Andrew on the day and negotiated that auction. So, it just shows you the skill of a good agent and a good auctioneer, Kevin.
Oh, look, it certainly does, and I mean it's interesting to hear that they had a relationship with the property which was extended. Certainly, I mean, I was interested to hear that the agent showed the potential purchaser around the property prior to it being listed, because that's a technique that we often see used with purchasers. Sometimes it doesn't even need to go to auction, but the pre-marketing inspection is something that quite often creates a sense of urgency amongst buyers and may actually lead to a successful result, whether or not the property actually proceeds to auction.
Interesting point, this one, because I spoke to the owners of this property who looked around extensively to find the agent they would appoint, and they appointed Ray White. It was interesting for me to find out that many of the agents in that area said, don't go to auctions. Auctions don't work in this area. And, I made the point at the time to Jenny and Graham that it's got nothing to do with the concept. It's all about how the agent handles it. And auctions work anywhere. It's a method of sale. So I'd really counsel anyone to make sure that if you're going to go to auction, make sure you appoint an agent who knows what they're doing, because it will work. There is a system, and you follow that system, and it works every time. Kevin, that's what I find.
Yeah, look, I think you definitely see in Brisbane, and also where I'm speaking from in Adelaide, that agents do actually take a deal of care in choosing the properties that they take to auction. Sydney and Melbourne quite often, because auction is much more accepted as a method of sale, you do tend to find properties heading to auction much more widely than you do in Sydney and than in Adelaide and Brisbane.
Yeah, and the other point too, I think, is that okay, sure, agents may select the property, but every property will sell. It just comes down to the price, and I think it's the mindset of the agent, and certainly the mindset of the seller. If you're going to go down the process, you've got to follow the system. So. I had an interesting debate with, we're off point here, but we'll keep going with it. I had an interesting debate with a buyer's agent recently when I said to her, every property sells, it all comes down to the price. And she said, well, I don't know about that. But when you think about it, every property sells, it really comes down to the price. And, this property here, it sold under the hammer for $637,000. Just to prove my point, and this is a silly way to prove it, but if you actually had that property on the market for $550,000, it would sell very quickly. So real buyers know value.
Oh, absolutely, but it's down to the vendors knowing value as well. I've recently witnessed an auction where I felt the bidding went above what I actually expected, and yet the property was still passed in and is now back on the market. So I think a successful outcome is dependent upon the agent actually managing their vendors' expectations as well.
Absolutely.
Because if there's an unrealistic expectation that cannot be met, then you're not going to end up with a successful outcome.
So that proves what I was saying, which is it's all about the seller. And, every property sells, it just comes down to the price. And at the end of the day, the seller is the one who will decide what the price is or what they'll accept. So
yes, yeah.
Interesting, very interesting. Hey, let's go to the ACT, Kevin. Have a look at our top sale came out of Chapman. I'm really keen to hear what you've got to say about that. 875,000, Luton selling this one. They sell a lot of properties. We've featured them a lot in this show. Mark Donahue, 4-bedroom, fully renovated this one, polished timber floors, double glazing, contemporary kitchen, alfresco deck area, timber deck, as I said, and a 500-litre water tank. What's water like in Canberra? Is it a bit short?
Oh, look, it's interesting. I mean, 500 litres. I mean, my tank's 165,000 litres. So, quote Crocodile Dundee, that's not a tank. Look, I think obviously it can get very dry, but 500 litres, I would imagine, is too small to do anything other than maybe
water or veggie patch
or whatever. But I mean, I've certainly, with those bushfires that have been through Canberra, having a dedicated water supply in a tank would certainly be something that I would imagine a lot of property owners would do.
And what can you tell me about Chapman?
Yeah, so this is a suburb where we've actually seen a significant increase in the median house price since 2018, 20%. This property is 1,000 square metres or more, 15 kilometres southwest of Canberra. And it's interesting to track the the price range, the price changes that have occurred here. This property has actually transacted several times. 2012 for 572,000, 2015 for 780,000, and then obviously this latest transaction at 875,000. So you can see that price progression over the last 7 or so years.
Yeah, indeed. Okay, we'll take you to South Australia before we take you to the Worm. But 3 Darrell Avenue, Wattle Park, $880,000, Toop and Toops, Peter and Eloise McMillan. Selling this 4-bedder, private, elevated position, quiet street, brilliant city views, this one. Double brick construction, 3 bedrooms, mature fruit trees, a cellar room, low maintenance landscape gardens. Quite a nice home. Tell me about Wattle Park, Kevin.
Yes, so Wattle Park is in what we would term the foothills of the Adelaide Hills. So it's on the way to the Adelaide Hills proper. And I mean, the beauty of this property in this location is the elevation that allows views back over the other suburbs, the inner suburbs of Adelaide and through to the Adelaide skyline. Predominantly at this sort of level, you don't actually see much of the built environment before you see the city, because Adelaide inner suburbs are actually quite heavily vegetated with significant mature trees. So I'm biased, but I think it's a very attractive view out towards the city. Again, quite tightly held. This is only 8 kilometres away from the city, so it's reasonably close in. As it's coming traffic down from the hills, it's relatively sparse in terms of routes into the city, so it's not terribly congested to get in. 865,000 is the median house price here. It's very slightly down in 2019, but there has been steady growth over an extended period in this locality, so it is quite sought after, predominantly because of the ease of access to the city and the views.
Okay, well, let's bring up our final graphic for the show. I just want to go to the Worm, and I just would be keen to get your view on this. What I've demonstrated here is spared no expense, I've got to say, with the graphics. But anyway, I played with your graphics, your Worm graphics, Kevin. But
yes.
On the left-hand side there, I'm trying to demonstrate the price or the rolling improvement in clearance rates in that period of time compared to the same over a much shorter period of time now. So that gathering back of the market has happened much quicker than it did back in 2012, 13, 14.
Yes, if you have a look at that recent increase in clearance rates, you can definitely see that it has been on a trajectory that takes it to about the level that we're at now. I mean, it's unrealistic to expect that the increase will continue at that rate once you hit around the 80% mark. But it did get there very quickly indeed. And unlike in 2013, where there are a couple of steps along the way, it really has just gone straight up to get to that point.
Yeah, indeed. All right, my friend, we'll leave it there, but thank you. Just a few final points. Kevin Brogan will join me on Friday, and we will look at the final results as they come out from CoreLogic. Kevin Brogan joins me every Monday, every Friday, from CoreLogic, and we look at the most extensive review and preview of the auction market around Australia. Kevin Brogan, thanks for your time, my friend. We'll catch you again on Friday.
Cheers. Thank you, Kevin.